Imagine a world filled with ramps and roads. Imagine that the inhabitants of this world don't run or jump. The reason? The planet isn't crawling with creatures. It's driving with cars. Cars that move and think and feel, independently operating without input from any other organism. Not dissimilar to the vehicles from the movie Cars, they possess mouths and eyes. Driven, pun intended, only by animalistic instincts, they warily watch their wheeled peers coast down the beaches. For in this ecosystem of cannibal lightning McQueens, only the fittest are worthy of survival. Next, imagine Earth. All its creatures great and small, swimming and buzzing and crawling and climbing and running and flying. The most obvious feature of most animals is their capacity for motion, the ability to actively maneuver about their environment, navigating a cruel and treacherous world. Picture, if you will, a scenario in which land-based organisms possessed wheels at the terminal points of their limbs. For example, bobcats and deer and mice, all equipped with their own sets of rollerblades. Now, combine these two ideas. Merge them together and imagine the result. Considering this alternate biosphere, you'll get a glimpse into the metal world of Alternate Sidus. The previously described scenario, seemingly outlandish at first, takes place on an alternate, fictional planet. Originally conceived and described by the YouTube channel known as the Speculative Wildlife Research Center, scenarios like these become reality. Sidus is an alternate, Earth-like planet in an alien solar system, one rich in dense elements such as iron, copper, and other metals. In real life, salt crystals are cube-shaped. If broken in half, the empty spaces on each respective fragment are completely devoid of material. However, if placed in a salty solution, these crystals can regrow their missing halves. Imagining various chemical reactions like this, some may produce byproduct, being waste material. But what if this waste material helped to induce a different reaction, catalyzing the growth of a separate crystalline compound? On Sidus, these silica and metal-based rocks form the basis for non-cellular life. Little more than rocks on their own, complex chains of chemical reactions can create the basis for life, animate bodies capable of movement and metabolism. Plants, also present, take the form of great lenses, magnifying light in order to heat up internal liquid and cause chemical reactions. This photosynthesis analog allows energy to enter Sidus's biosphere, where it can then move up the food chain. The world of Sidus, as I just described it, was created by the Speculative Wildlife Research Center. Inspired by this delightful concept, I drew up some sketches of how I imagined cars with functioning wheels might evolve on such a planet. I published a video discussing the subject, but its production was very rushed. A total of 3 Speculative Wildlife Research Center videos have been made about Sidus by the original creator at the time of this video's release. I started working on a remake of my video in late November of 2024. I began to design and create new organisms for my alternate Sidus, but I invented so many that it was hard to keep track of them all. I got to the point that I even began having dreams about the new concepts I had planned. Taking breaks, car pun intended, some of which spanned entire months, I have been working on the project for what feels like a long time. Here is the final product. The planetary surface of Alternate Sidus consists of a fragmented network of tectonic plates that compose the crust. The subduction zones, where plates slide under one another and melt, are typically covered by oceans and seas. The primary fluid medium is a form of non-combustible oil that collects in the crust's divots and draws. Around 50% of the planet is covered by these oceans, making them appear as borders between continents. One ramification of having oil oceans is that tectonic plates display more activity, making volcanoes and mountain ranges very common. On Earth, water from the oceans helps to melt tectonic plates as they subduct. While water is normally thought of as a coolant, it actually lowers the melting point of the rock, making the rock more easy to melt into magma. Think of it this way. Rock is a very hard substance to melt because it requires high temperatures to do so. This means it takes a lot of energy to heat up the rock to its melting point. Boiling water takes energy too. The temperature at which water boils is lower, much lower than the temperature that melts rock. Liquid water is therefore easy to boil, but by comparison, rock is much harder to melt. Earth's water oceans and the subducting tectonic plates mix together as they subduct. That means that the energy needs to heat a mix of rock and water. The temperature needed to heat rock is high, and the temperature to heat water is low, so the temperature to heat them both combined is somewhere in between. This is how ocean water helps melt tectonic plates. Water lowers the amount of energy needed to heat up the collective material. We can see this on the chart because the energy needed to heat up the pure rock is larger than the amount of energy needed to heat up a mix. Now we can move to discussing the oil oceans of Alternate Sidus. Oil is denser than water. It takes more energy to boil a pot of oil than it would to boil a pot of water. This means that we can place the boiling point of oil higher up on the chart. The melting point of rock stays the same. At the subduction zones in the oil oceans of Sidus, the rock mixes with oil. If it would take less energy to boil oil than to melt rock, that means that to heat up a mixture of the two, it would take an amount of energy somewhere in between. The difference between Earth and the planet Sidus is that one has water oceans and one has oil oceans. We can see on the charts that it takes more energy to heat up water than to heat up oil, meaning that it is easier to heat up a mix of water and rock than it is to heat up a mix of rock and oil. That means that as they move into the planet's mantle, it takes longer to melt the rock into magma. On Sidus, the tectonic plates can slide deeper as they subduct. This puts them further down in the mantle than on Earth. Going further down into the mantle gets them closer to Sidus's core. This will heat them up slightly more than on Earth, causing them to rise much faster. Sliding the extra distance also makes the melted rock go farther down under the other tectonic plate. Combined, the magma's faster rising speed means that volcanic explosions are much more violent, and they expel significantly more lava during the eruption process. The extra length traveled by the rock before melting means that the volcanoes can appear much further inland than on Earth, being central to the continent. This difference of larger and farther reaching volcanoes, when applied at the planetary scale, causes radical alterations to the planet's geography, at least when compared to Earth. Continents are dotted with more volcanoes, spewing out lava to create new layers of rock. The borders between continents also exhibit more fractures than on Earth. Giant volcano eruptions also have another consequence: volcanic ash. When a volcano erupts, it flings particulate matter into the atmosphere. These volcanic clouds can then partially block out the sun, making the environment dimmer than on a clear-skied day. This also means that rain on Sidus contains more minerals than on Earth, which can help distribute these compounds around the globe. These minerals can sometimes cover city-sized plots of land with a thin layer of silica compounds, filling in small cracks in the metallic dirt. For the sake of simplicity, the biomes that I will be covering in this dedicated section will be solely land-based. This means that almost exclusively terrestrial organisms will be discussed later. However, if there is enough demand, I will make a second video to discuss the many creatures that won't be featured here. The mountain biomes are formed from supervolcanoes, or from magma plumes that erupted out of the ground, forming mountains, huge cliffs, and jagged landforms. The only life that can colonize the mountains are the photosynthetic plants and the group of animal equivalents known as polypods, but more on this later. Lava expelled by standard volcanoes almost always hardens into large lava flows, similar to those found in North America. A large number of these lava flows will, over time, accumulate into large, flat expanses known as racing flats. The volcanoes and the surrounding flat area will become hosts to different forms of crystals, some of which may encourage each other's growth. These replicating crystals are not considered alive. Rather, they are a form of abiotic plankton. Similar to plankton in Earth's oceans, abiotic replicators may form the basis for food chains. These land-based crystals typically exist in more desolate landscapes, because in areas like established forests, they are easily outcompeted by actual plants with lenses. Often, abiotic plankton are the first colonizers of a newly cooled racing flat. Racing flats will inevitably be colonized by more complex life. Wheeled animals similar to rodents, being small and lightweight, will move into the area after an ecosystem has been established by insect analogs and small plants. This turns them into delta plains, so named after their state of change. Delta plains may be home to organisms such as the rebar plant. Mats of hexagonal lensed plants will also flourish in this area, sometimes creating a distinctly tiered landscape. The volcano, if dormant, can sometimes crumble into a more flattened shape, giving the environment a plain-like appearance. Savannas are considered the successors of delta plains, offering more biodiversity in terms of plant and animal species. Pyramid-like colonies of abiotic replicators can shape the landscape over time, speeding up erosion and creating a more traditional ecosystem. Trees may also be present. Lakes, streams, and rivers can also become established in these areas. It is rare for life-hosting ponds to exist in delta plains. If the habitat is isolated by miles of flat land, then it may become a mirror mesa, so named after the reflective plants that so often occur there. Pillar plants can form tall towers, which may in turn become covered with a crust of parasites, both living and abiotic. However, if the savanna is located near a mountain, then it will often become a road forest. Road forests are so named because of their tendency to resemble a series of overlapping highways supported by stilts. These plants are actually colonies of hexagonal, umbrella-shaped plants. The lensed plants spread to new destinations via hook seeds, a plant which latches onto a wheeled animal's leg to hitch a free ride. Once a suitable location is reached, then the hook seed will detach and sprout a road forest founding colony. The reason that road forests form closer to mountains is because mountains are already colonized by non-wheeled animals, as well as a variety of plants. These non-wheeled animals can act as pollinators, thus attracting the roads by encouraging their growth. A road forest is capable of moving up a mountain, because the hexagonal highways can still grow on steep ground. This creates roads that lead up into the mountains, on which wheeled animals may still roam. As plants live and die on the mountainside, they will break down rock at the foot of the mountain, making the local area more flat, therefore allowing wheeled animals to travel. Thus, mountains can be slowly deconstructed and replaced with road forests. The stages of biome post-eruption are as follows: racing flats, delta plains, savannas, and lastly, mirror mesas or road forests. Abiotic land-based replicators, as previously discussed, are not truly alive. However, they still make an impact on the ecosystem by breaking down waste or converting materials and rocks into various forms of rust. Modular land plankton may occasionally form into large colonies, assembling and working together similar to plants. These colonies are little more than rocks capable of forming chains of structures that can convert chemicals into other forms of alloy or crystal. However, this balance can be easily disrupted by environmental conditions, such as temperature and food availability, causing the abiotic colony to collapse. The presence of these replicators may appear to indicate that food is much more abundant than on Earth. While abiotic plankton replicators do serve as a food source for so-called herbivores, the reality is that only a fraction of their compounds are actually useful to true organisms. Any foraging animal looking to feast upon land plankton must first locate a variant that their species can safely consume. This sometimes can involve sorting or sifting through large racing flats, across which are scattered only a few edible plankton types. True animals on the planet Sidus are generally considered to be descendants of lensed plants. Some lensed plants grow multiple branches, each terminating in a separate light-catching mechanism. Some of these are able to angle their lensed leaves to better catch the sunlight at any given point in the day. This indicates that they are related to the most primitive clade of animals on Alternate Sidus, the Polypods. Polypod, a title meaning multiple feet, refers to the fact that these organisms do not use their limbs as leaves. Rather, their ability to angle their limbs allows them to use the structures as legs. Most polypods are radially symmetrical, meaning that their symmetry extends in multiple directions. It is also typical for polypods to have a core for a body, from which the limbs extend. It is important to note that these legs, like the core body, lack joints and are completely rigid. The only place that a limb can bend is at its shoulder where it attaches to the body. The jumping urchin is a good example of a basal polypod. They resemble roughly sphere-like cores with several spikes protruding from holes in the shell. These spikes slide in a linear manner, moving up or down but never detaching from the body. This unique method of movement allows jumping urchins the ability to jump by flinging their core into the air. They also have the ability to flip over, as shown on screen, angling their body to jump in any direction. Another basal polypod is known as the Snaptrapper. This organism has 6 limbs and is specialized to hunt and kill wheeled animals. The Snaptrapper seeks out abiotic plankton using its multiple eyes to get an omnidirectional view. Then, it buries itself in the substrate, be it sand or metallic dirt. This species can sense vibrations within the ground, and can sense whenever a car animal is coming. When the car is right above the specimen, it leaps upward and grabs onto the animal's leg using its hooks. The straight, stumpy legs are then pushed against the wheels of the animal, slowing it down until it eventually tires. Pun intended. Once the host is exhausted, the Snaptrapper will consume the body by tearing or snapping off small chunks of metal. It will then proceed to deposit its incubated young near the host's dead body, providing the offspring with a first meal. The corpse will also attract other wheeled animals, which the Snaptrapper can latch onto and repeat the cycle. Related to and descended from the basal polypods are Bilaterians. These organisms have right-to-left symmetry that extends down the body. They possess a head with a defined mouth at the front of the body. This morphology makes it easier to travel in one direction. Basal Bilaterians possess as many as 9 pairs of legs, giving some a centipede-like appearance. Sometimes these organisms are called inchers because of their insect-like nature. One species of Bilaterian is known as the leaping bug, sometimes called the groundhopper. The leaping bug has 4 eyes, 2 at the front of the body and 2 at the end of the body. Members of the species can slide their stilt-like legs up and down. They also possess 4 legs, each of which is flattened and used to burrow into the dirt. As a form of locomotion, the leaping bug jumps forward by sliding its legs and pushing against the ground. It will then land upside down after jumping. However, because the leaping bug has eyes on both ends of the body, it can continue its jumping path without any hindrance due to lack of sight. Bilaterians, because their bodies are streamlined for travel in a single direction, are highly diverse in nature. Some have adapted to an aquatic lifestyle, their legs now resembling flippers or fins. They tend to swim in the oil oceans, feeding off aquatic abiotic plankton, as well as minerals from tectonic subduction zones. These swimmers take on the role of fish and marine mammals. One type of swimmer, known as the Crested Leviathan, can reach extremely large sizes. This is accomplished by lurking in the deep and then bursting up toward swimming prey, similar to a breaching great white shark. At some point in Sidus's history, there existed a small swimmer species measuring around 30 centimeters in total length. Possessing only 4 fins, this particular swimmer was a bottom feeder, eating particles of iron-based plankton that collected within the sand. The creature consumed its food in a manner similar to the microscopic animals known as rotifers, that is, by wafting food into its mouth. The key difference, however, was the method that this small swimmer used to sift through the silt. Each fin, internally modified for the task of generating a magnetic field, could act as an electromagnet to pull the iron-based planktonic replicators into its mouth. Around the same time, a species of non-colonial lensed plant had recently lost its lens through natural selection. The plant was aquatic, living in the tidal zones of the oil oceans. Instead of using light for food, this sand dollar-shaped plant possessed a hole in the place of its lens. This hole acted as a sort of mouth, taking in planktonic replicators for digestion within. Because the swimmer and the disc-like plant both consumed mostly the same foods, they would inevitably end up within the same habitat, seeking out plankton-rich areas. However, instead of competing for resources, the two species entered into a symbiosis, wherein each of the swimmer's limbs would use its electromagnet to grasp onto a corresponding circular plant, allowing both species to collect more food over more territory. The swimmer's fins would elongate into more cylindrical shapes, and the plant's mouths would engulf the tips of the limbs. This symbiosis allowed the swimmer to consume abiotic food, where it would be partially digested. Then, a share of the nutrients would be delivered to the wheels via tubes internal to each of the four limbs. This allowed the symbiotic pair to traverse beaches in a search of food, and to escape predators. These two species would speciate to the point that they acted as a single organism, essentially merging to become the first wheeled animals. These car creatures, or wheelie mobiles, then became the progenitors of all wheeled life on Alternate Sidus. They possess the ability to spin their wheels in either direction, to cruise along using momentum without actively pulsing their magnets, and to magnetically lock their wheels, using the last behavior as a braking system. A selection of these species will be presented using the newly created 3D models, but first, their basic morphology will be discussed. All cars possess a carapace, or hull, that acts as an exoskeletal layer of metal. The main body of the car takes the form of a single, rigid body. The hull is completely contiguous and has no points of articulation, other than the legs. This means that wheeled animals are incapable of moving their jaws, and possess no joints for their external mouthparts. Instead, different features found on the main body are simply processes, a term which refers to an outgrowth or projection of a large bone. A car's processes may take the form of teeth, tusks, fins, and/or flattened extensions of the body. They can also take the form of hoods or spoilers in order to help the car become more aerodynamic. It should be noted that the hull of a wheeled animal is not the primary source of structural integrity, at least not for the internal organs. Instead, the carapace acts as a thick layer of metal to protect from corrosion and physical damage. The tooth-type processes act mostly as a means of manipulating the environment, whether through digging or hunting. They also act similar to spines or horns, allowing the car to actively defend against predators. The hull of a wheeled animal is made of a semi-brittle metallic alloy, similar to the metal used by manufacturers to create small files. This nature means that if subjected to stress, a car's teeth or fins are more likely to snap off instead of bending. Each leg also possesses an external hull, only being able to move at the joint where the leg protrudes from a hole in the core body. As previously discussed, each limb ends in a wheel. The wheel's primary building material is similar to that of a hammer, being less fragile and having similar ductile qualities. This means that damage to the wheels of the metal car is less likely, but not unheard of. Large amounts of kinetic force can cause dents in the wheels or even cause chunks to fall off. Damage to one or more wheels is a death sentence to the car, especially if the piece of the wheel breaks off, wheel pun intended. The fact that the wheels and the hull of a wheeled animal are made from different metals means that the organisms need a varied diet consisting of different minerals. Each car, as well as some of their closer polypod relatives, have exactly 4 eyes at the front of the body. This helps a wheeled animal to sense and survey its environment. The eyes are made of a glass-like silica crystal and act as convex lenses. Behind each lens is a cavity, the walls of which are covered in an array of small, heat-sensitive pieces of metal. These slivers, like most metals, contract and expand when exposed to heat or energy. Based on the angle of the light source, the lens will concentrate the rays on certain regions of the cavity walls. This heat source will cause some pieces of metal to contract, while others expand. Based on the contraction and expansion of the slivers, the car can determine what direction the light is coming from. The eyes of wheeled animals possess crystal clear vision, rock pun intended, being able to see crisp images. Cars cannot, however, distinguish between most colors, other than the fact that some areas are darker than others. For example, the color purple is a mix of blue and red. If the car were to view a blue shape, then it would receive a certain amount of light. However, if the car were to view a purple shape, the presence of blue and red would absorb more light, making the purple figure appear darker than the blue one. There are many more details I have created regarding the wheeled animal's anatomy and physiology, but for the sake of simplicity, these will not be discussed in this video. If you would like to support my endeavor to catalog the planet of Alternate Sidus and are interested in learning more, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Like I said, this video only has part of the entire lore. I wouldn't want to spoil the fun. Car pun intended. The first wheeled animals were around the size of a toy RC car and behaved as basic herbivores and scavengers. However, now they can grow much larger and have diversified to fill different ecological niches. Many cars engage in predator-prey relationships, as evidenced by their physical features. The Tusked Pigdeer is a wheeled animal roughly the size of a golf cart. Its mouth and exoskeletal processes are modified into a scoop-like shape with tusks. Pigdeer are semi-social, but often, after a brief rearing period, juveniles may live solitary lives until adulthood. The tusks are shaped so because of the organism's foraging diet. Their long shape allows the mouth to be used to uproot a certain species of stalked hexagonal plants. Because the tusk cannot move or flex, the pigdeer must angle its body in order to accomplish this. The species does not feed off the hexagons themselves. They are much too large to fit in the car's mouth. Rather, they primarily feed off semi-symbiotic plankton replicators found near the base of the lens plants. These stalks naturally excrete certain minerals as a result of the heat-catalyzed reactions they use to make energy. These minerals are utilized by land plankton to build large colonies consisting of several variants. These plankton replicator variants are then eaten by the pigdeer. The pigdeer also displays flattened legs, making them more efficient at racing away from predators. Their spoiler is relatively baseline for the larger pigdeer clade, allowing stabilization at high speeds, but also enabling a short turn radius. The Anylo cow, sometimes referred to as the spined bison, is a large herbivore measuring around 2 Earth trucks long. Named after the Earth dinosaur Ankylosaurus, the animal boasts an impressive rim of plate-like spines around the body. These act as a defense against packs of predators that might try to attack an individual. For this reason, Anylo cows are herd-based animals that group together for protection. An Earth-native observer may conclude that the defensive plates are obnoxiously large, but because the wheeled animals are made of metal, they can support more elaborate and extravagant physical structures than Earth animals. The keen viewer will note that the Anylo cow doesn't possess a spoiler. The reason for this is that the species is a grazing animal, with mouthparts specialized for eating rebar plants. They do not need to hunt and are much too large to run long distances, so they do not need to reach high speeds. The legs are also very thick and cylindrical. The reason for this is to support the animal's large weight. The bladed jouster is a carnivore, pun intended, mentioned in this list. The car creature is named for its long tusks, which resemble a more blunt version of medieval jousting sticks. They are used in a similar manner. However, their thickness means that they can be used as a ramming device to inflict blunt force trauma upon the prey item. This animal belongs to a clade known as the serrated bladed saw cars, so named after their key identifying characteristic. The front left wheel is modified into a saw. This saw is used to cut the carapace of prey items after they have been hit by the jouster. The victim is then sawed into tiny bits. This is necessary because the mouth of the predator is very small, which is a result of the jousting rods taking up space around the mouth. Bladed jousters will often guard their kills after shattering, rupturing, or cutting apart the prey item. The victim's carcass will rot over time, so the jouster eats the pieces least resistant to corrosion as its first meal, preserving the overall corpse for longer. This species will also sharpen their saw blades on the surrounding plants and rocks as a method to mark their territory. A close relative of the bladed jouster is the nozzled sprayer blade. This creature gets its name primarily from its highly specialized mouth, which takes the form of a large, cone-like projection. Similar to the Jouster, a nozzled sprayer will hunt its prey primarily through speed. They are, however, endurance racers and can therefore hunt the more sleek and faster prey items in a fashion similar to a cheetah. They are not able to hunt the more tank-like animals because they have no means of defending themselves against any herd animals that charge like a bull or rhinoceros. Instead, as the nozzled sprayer chases its prey, it will fill an internal chamber with liquid and begin to pressurize it. Once fully pressurized, the liquid will be sprayed out of the mouth with such force that it flies forward. The fluid is a dark black color that will coat the rear tires and underside of the prey item. As the victim races away, it will experience trouble steering. This lack of contact with the ground will lead to the prey item slipping and spinning out of control. Essentially, the nozzled sprayer is capable of expelling an oil slick onto the hind limbs of its target. After around 4 minutes, the liquid hardens into a sticky, tar-like substance. If careening out of control does not flip over the prey organism, then as the fluid cures, it will make escape from the predator almost impossible. Once immobilized or significantly damaged, the prey animal will be sawed into small pieces and consumed. The Frilled Glower is a carnivore, pun intended, again, that relies on ambush hunting. The body is a more stout design, favoring stability over speed. A large, rigid frill is present on the body, making the animal resemble an hourglass shape from above. The Frilled Glower's carapace is partially absent on the front legs. Instead, a mirror-like metal covers the gap. When angled parallel to the ground, the shade from the frill conceals this metal. However, the legs possess the ability to rotate downwards. This allows sunlight to pass through the gap in the frill and shine directly onto the metal, reflecting the light rays forward. The animal will then lie in wait and use this tactic to stun prey, temporarily obscuring the target's vision with a blinding brightness. The Frilled Glower will then accelerate forward, knocking the smaller animal over. It then proceeds to crush the prey item, using its wheels to finalize the kill. The name Frilled Glower comes from the offensive glare used on prey. However, the behavior may also be used as a strategy for defense against larger predators. The diet of a juvenile glower consists primarily of polypods lacking wheels. Adults feed off smaller cars of various species. A close relative of the glower is the Largolimb, named after the word largo, meaning long in Spanish. This species possesses a cage-like mouth that can be used to scoop small polypods off the ground. The long limbs of this animal give it an especially high range of movement, allowing the car to adjust itself into a range of flattened or upright positions. The species is known to occasionally subsist off an omnivorous diet, eating planktonic replicators or small seeds. The Threshing Hammer belongs to a clade known as fusiform tripods, a name referring to the fusion of their hind limbs into a single structure. This particular species has a spur at the terminal end of their hind limb, also having a thin vestigial spoiler at the end of the body. Threshing hammers hunt by accelerating towards a prey item and then stopping, causing their body and hind leg to move upwards from the momentum. The spur focuses the force of the attack on a small surface area, usually shattering the area of the hull closest to the impact location. Threshing hammers may use this attack to easily kill small-wheeled polypods, but to hunt larger cars, they form packs. These groups can hunt and kill animals much larger than any singular individual could, similar to how Deinonychus raptors are thought to have hunted. The organisms possess forward-facing eyes for better depth perception, not unlike a jumping spider. This allows them to accurately gauge the distance at which they should begin to swing their hind limb upwards for the optimum strike. The front wheels have a large radius, longer than that of the head, so that a threshing hammer's face does not scrape against the ground. Notches in the sides of the carapace allow the forelegs to angle upwards, lowering the body to the ground so that the mouth can scoop up pieces of the prey item. Dipods are car creatures that have completely lost the wheels of their fused hind limb in favor of a two-wheeled design. Dipod means 2 foot. This limits the size of any given species because this body plan becomes less stable as size and weight increases. One highly social species of dipod is sometimes called the polypod chain train. Each individual possesses a long, forward-facing process extending from above its mouth. This rigid snout is used as a navigation tool, pushing aside pebble-sized objects in search of food. The organisms still retain part of their hind limb, utilizing it as an aid for balance. The ring-like shape also serves another purpose, an attachment point for the snout of another individual. In a behavior similar to that of elephants, this particular species of dipod will form a caravan by hooking their exoskeletal processes around the hind limb of the individual that precedes them. In this way, a group may form a convoy or chain resembling a line of wagons. This gives them a distinct train-like appearance similar to that of a centipede. Polypod chain trains do this because it makes a group appear larger than it actually is, and also provides safety in numbers. Whenever a predator is detected, the specimens will disperse. This scattering makes it harder for the predator to focus on catching any particular individual, therefore increasing the likelihood of survival for each specimen. Some fusiform tripods have adapted to an almost completely aquatic lifestyle. One such species is known as the Propelled Paddlewheel. The two wheels at the end of the hind limb are modified into propeller-like rotating fans. The limb is capable of moving up and down to help the creature control its movement. The front two wheels resemble paddle wheels, not dissimilar to those found on steamboats. The depicted specimen is a member of a more basal group that hunts through most levels of the ocean. However, some species have specialized for gliding, growing larger hoods that function similar to wings on an airplane. The gliding variants typically skim across the surface of the ocean as their main means of propulsion. One population of the gliding variants would experience radical changes over time, shifting the angles of their wheels and eventually becoming capable of true powered flight. These drone-like organisms are a relatively recent development on Alternate Sidus. Both front limbs possess an equally sized propeller. The fused hind legs exhibit two smaller propellers. Each of these modified wheels spins in the opposite direction of their non-diagonal neighbors, stabilizing flight. These creatures' four propellers give them the name of tetracopters. Because tetracopters are aerial creatures, their eyesight is an essential quality for survival. Due to this fact, the species has developed a series of extra exoskeletal processes. These extra structures protrude from the area around the eyes, guarding the lenses from scratches. Tetracopters have completely lost their ambulatory ability, being incapable of driving or racing. This forces them to rely entirely upon their propellers for locomotion. Therefore, developing tetracopters, after birth, are very weak until they develop the ability to fly. This renders the newborn offspring vulnerable to predatory attacks. Because of this, tetracopters primarily live in mountains near or on cliff sides. Currently, tetracopters feed off non-wheeled polypods and are too small to target even the most diminutive dipods. However, their inevitable population boom is looming on the horizon, flight pun intended, and the age of dragons will soon come. As you may have noticed, most of these species are identified by relatively informal names. Now that all the species in this video are covered, I offer an opportunity to you, the viewer. Like the video and comment your thoughts on what the species' scientific names should be. Have any other ideas, feedback? Let me know in the comments. Remember, this video does not cover all the information about Alternate Sidus, only offering a selection of some organisms. If you really enjoyed the video, after you subscribe, make sure to visit the links in the description. Their designs will be published as STL files available for download. I also intend to make some designs purchase only. It will cost money to obtain them for yourself. If I get more subscribers who are interested in speculative biology, I will make sure I start working on the second video. This was a video made by the HQ14. Like and subscribe, and remember, stay curious.